Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you are new. In this video, I'm going to be tackling a new Patreon request. Let me just use this as an opportunity to give a massive thanks to the individuals who support me on Patreon and have really assisted with the growth and continued development of the channel throughout their support, and more things to come on that in the near future as well. Link to the Patreon page is in the description box below for those who want to check it out. This request comes from Jay, and I know someone will ask, so I will just say it's not the same Jay as the Jay from the podcast. We're dealing with a separate, distinct and mutually exclusive Jay here, which is good. Jay says, got a video request for you when you get time, please. The light heavyweight division is booming. Badou Jack under the Mayweather umbrella has got so much hype despite the Edwards loss, which, being fair, was a lucky but well-timed shot. Kovalev, everyone knows. Bivol, everyone jumps on because of his Monaco fight. But nobody talks about Beterbiev, who, in my opinion, before Buatsi comes of age, is by far the best light heavy. He has an epic amateur record, notably beating Kovalev twice. World lightweight champ 2009. Went up to amateur heavyweight, 190 or 200 pounds, fought Usyk twice, and very controversially lost in 2011, despite putting Usyk down and getting robbed again against Usyk in 2012 in London, where he clearly got the better, in my opinion. Since being pro, from 6th fight in which he destroyed Tavoris Cloud, his resume is quality. He doesn't lose rounds either, despite one flash off-balance knockdown against Page. The man has brute heavy hands as well as pop, great timing, balance and range of punches. Beast in a clinch too. Early in the pro ranks, he struggled with 175-pound weight, but has shown against Johnson and Colling, where he threw 1,111 punches, or maybe that's 111 punches a round. He does the weight well and doesn't fade. He doesn't have personality, unfortunately, but credit towards him for, in my opinion, being top class. My request, a video with a fair shake opinion on Beterbiev and how you think he'd fare against Kovalev, Jack, Bivol, Ward and Barrera, who repeatedly ducked him. Cheers, mate. Jay. Very, very interesting stuff. And let me start by saying I completely agree that Beterbiev is really the forgotten man of the light heavyweight division. You know, you've got guys like Andre Ward, who are known as like the top fighters in the game. You got guys like Kovalev, Stevenson. Kind of feels that those guys are like veterans, if you like, and you know that those guys are cemented as the top high class fighters in the 175-pound division. Then you got guys like Badou Jack, who's recently entered 175. A lot of excitement around him. You got guys coming through like Bivol, Anthony Yard, Buatsi, Gvozdek, lots of guys who are probably getting more hype and more discussion than Artur Beterbiev, despite the fact that Beterbiev actually has a version of a world title, currently. He does seem to be the forgotten man, and I think a large part of that is down to personality, like you've outlined in your initial email, Jay. And I also think some of it is that, with Beterbiev, I do vividly recall there being a lot of hype and a lot of talk about him back in the day. I mean, probably, back 2014, 2015, 2, 3, maybe even longer years ago, I kind of remember Beterbiev was one of these very, very hype prospects. Lots of people were talking about him. But if anything, it kind of feels like his career has lost a little bit of momentum, and it kind of feels like his name is less on people's lips than ever before, despite the fact that in his last fight he won the IBF world title. He's now 33 years old, so whilst he's kind of young in the professional game in the sense he's only had 12 fights, given that he's 33, you would suggest that the window of opportunity for him to really get involved in the big fights is in the next couple of years. So he's got to be moved relatively quickly. And what's frustrating is he only fought once in 2017, he fought twice in 16, twice in 15, he hasn't really been overly active. Only 5 fights since 2014. Only 1 fight last year. And he's someone who you'd want to see a lot more momentum over as he becomes a world champion and as he turns 33. So yeah, that's my thoughts. A lot of hype on him on the way up, specifically a lot of hype regarding his power. You know, people always buy into a boxer who hits as hard as Beterbiev does, and I completely agree with the points that Jay has outlined in his email about the punching power of Beterbiev. The word on the street, what I'm hearing now, is that he signed with Top Rank, who have, I believe, some sort of exclusive ESPN broadcast deal, and there is talk about him fighting next month. So that could be a kind of antidote to the to the sort of lack of momentum, lack of activity in his career that I think's cost him. You know, obviously working with Top Rank, being on ESPN, if that does actually happen, they're going to want to put him in big fights. It's going to grow his publicity, it's going to grow his public image, and you know, potentially that's where he's going to need to be. My question about it, and I don't want to be negative because I do think that's a positive move, but with that deal of ESPN and Top Rank, does that mean some of the bigger fights in the division are going to be harder to make? I mean, the other day we saw Bivol and Kovalev fight on the same card, and you know, it kind of implied that the two of them may be matched against each other at some point in the near future. You know, with Beterbiev ploughing his own furrow, so to speak, and doing things slightly differently, are the TV networks going to be a problem in terms of making those big unification fights happen? I'd also probably talk through the World Boxing Super Series as a potential avenue for him. You know, there's a lot of talk about the World Boxing Super Series second generation being held at light heavyweight, and certainly Beterbiev is one of those fighters you'd want in a World Boxing Super Series 175-pound mix. You know, if you were able to pick 8 fighters, I think we would all unanimously want Beterbiev as part of the 8. You know, because of his achievements in the amateurs, because of the way he's dealt with opposition in the pros, because of the fact he's got the IBF title, it would be a no-brainer. And a lot of the word on the street seems to be that 175-pound World Boxing Super Series second generation is a realistic possibility. So I don't know how this Top Rank deal, how this broadcast deal could affect that, but it would be unfortunate if he was unable to compete in a tournament like that if it was allowed, and you know, that could be really where he becomes a bit of a star. I guess what I would say at the minute is he is a light heavyweight world champion. He does have some credible names on the resume, but I don't think very many people would really consider Beterbiev the man at 175 pounds. You know, if I say to my YouTube channel, who is the top fighter at 175 pounds, I think you'd get Kovalev being the consensus 1. I think you'd get Stevenson being the consensus 2. I actually think more and more people would be referring to Bivol as the new kid on the block. And do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if, because of the hype surrounding them, some of the up-and-comers like a Yard or a Gvodzik actually got more reference than Beterbiev. So yeah, I think there is a little bit of a problem in terms of marketing him. Is it the activity? Is it the age? Is it the personality? It's probably a combination of all of the above. Stylistically, and I made not dissimilar comments to this when I talked about Bivol the other day. Stylistically, with Beterbiev, he's very heavy-handed, quite orthodox. He's not someone who's doing crazy, unexpected things in the ring. I would say he's quite orthodox in that perspective. Comes forward, does use his jab, does box from that middle range, really likes to sort of position you and get on top of you, close down the gap, and then bulldoze you out of there. So stylistically, there's scope for him to be involved in interesting fights. From a resume perspective, he's got some decent names on his resume, undoubtedly. Tavoris Cloud, it was an aging Cloud. It was a guy, you know, I think it was Cloud's last fight, and he'd suffered back-to-back losses, you know, going into that Beterbiev fight. Page Jr., I know he knocked Beterbiev down, etc. I know he was undefeated. He's had a few disappointing fights subsequently. He fought Campillo. Campillo's obviously a decent name, but that was again a kind of an end of career. Campillo won the belt against Coling. Again, a semi-credible name. Kind of hard to work out where we put him in the context of the light heavyweight division. You know, talk of a Marcus Brown fight. Now he's got his new deal. That would certainly be an interesting fight. You know, and that would probably be the most formidable name on his resume. So where I see Beterbiev so far is a guy who had a huge amount of hype early on, come forward fighter, boxer, pressure fighter, very heavy-handed, potentially an exciting fighter, but a guy who hasn't been marketed very well, a guy who has a limited time span to do what he needs to do, and a guy who's been inactive when he needed activity the very most. The resume, is okay. He's fought very, very good fighters, considering he's had 12 fights. But you could also say he's had a very average resume if you consider that he may only have 2 or 3 years left in the game. It kind of depends how you look at it. My questions about Beterbiev: is he slightly lacking the smoothness to his work? Is he slightly lacking the sort of fluid, flowing, classy boxing that we would expect for someone with his amateur pedigree? Is he a tactically versatile fighter? Is he someone who's going to be able to show us different looks in the ring? Is he someone who's going to be able to adapt his game at the highest level when those tests are put in front of him? Is he a bit slow? Does he have the necessary foot speed to be dealing with some of these elite level fighters? For me, those are actually fairly big questions around him. When I look at Beterbiev, I see a guy who has one mode of fighting. He does it very, very well, but so far in his career, he probably hasn't needed to show us more than that one mode. If I look at the Page Jr. fight, where Page knocked him down, that for me has always given me cause for concern over Beterbiev. Not specifically because of the knockdown, more because of the visual impression that I was left with after the first round. I appreciate it's one round of boxing. I appreciate some fighters have a look round one and it takes them a while to get going. But the impression that I had watching that fight is that Beterbiev struggled with Page's movement, with Page's flowing boxing, with Page's speed. And I actually thought Beterbiev looked a little bit uncomfortable in there, admittedly, for one round. Looking back on it, I don't really see Page Jr. as like an elite level test for Beterbiev. But I thought he made Beterbiev look uncomfortable. He tested, he maybe exposed in Beterbiev a slight lack of speed, a slight lack of balance, a slight lack of versatility. This is the versatility thing that I'm talking about. Beterbiev, to be fair to him, did find a very, very early stoppage in that fight. So maybe he did adapt to get Page out of there. Maybe I'm being harsh. But I kind of looked at that and I thought, could a slick boxer, could a guy with movement, could a guy with real ring smarts cause him problems? And, I have to say, if I talk about guys like an elite, peak Andre Ward, if I talk about like a sort of a peak Bernard Hopkins when he was in the game, if I had a gun put to my head, I would pick those sort of guys to beat Beterbiev at their best. I would say that those are guys who adapt their game. Those are guys who crack codes, solve puzzles, find solutions to difficult fighters. And I think that a guy like Andre Ward and a guy like Bernard Hopkins would be so prepared to step into the ring with someone like a Beterbiev that they'd know exactly what he was going to do, and they'd have an advanced game plan of how to beat him and how to take him out of his modus operandi, if you like. Fighting Beterbiev is a formidable test for anyone, but let's be honest, you kind of know what he's going to do in there. So far in his career to date, he's kind of sown one route to getting the job done, and when you have a fighter like that, for me, I always kind of back the Hopkins and the Ward style fighters to kind of work them out and kind of do something that negates their A game and really tests if they've got a B game. I mean, how many times did we see that in Bernard Hopkins' career? How many times have we kind of seen that in Andre Ward's career? So that would be my sort of real doubt about Beterbiev so far. Talk of the other names in the division. So Jay has referenced Kovalev, Badu Jack, Sullivan Barrera, Bivol. Let's start with Sullivan Barrera. I think Barrera would probably get stopped by Beterbiev. I actually see the fight as quite similar to Barrera versus Bivol. Barrera, solid, tough, fundamentally lacking in that elite level skill. I was frustrated by his performance against Bivol. No versatility. Stood at the end of the punches of a guy with a bit more power, with a bit more class than him. Kind of looked a bit out of ideas. I suspect we would see the same problem if he fought Artur Beterbiev. I think Beterbiev actually makes fairly easy work of a guy like Sullivan Barrera. The other guys are interesting. I think a guy like Badu Jack would potentially test Beterbiev in ways that he hasn't been tested before. I actually think Bivol would possibly go into that fight having a considerable speed advantage to Beterbiev. I just look at Bivol and I see him as a bit snappier, a bit sharper than what I've seen in Beterbiev so far. I always think when you're fighting a guy like Beterbiev, and you know, this is me speaking from the sofa here, I've obviously never fought a guy like Beterbiev, but when you're speaking with when you're dealing with a Beterbiev, the worst thing you want to do is what Sullivan Barrera did against Bivol. You don't just want to stand at the end of their work, stand at that 3/4 range where they're at the most deadliest. You've got to mix it up. You've got to go backwards, so he's got to chase you and you can catch him coming in. You've got to go forwards. You've got to sit on his chest, bring the pressure, see if he's got an inside game. See if he can still get those punches off with the same power if you're only an inch away from him. You can't just stand at the end of his work. And for what it's worth, I think that's what a guy like Sullivan Barrera would do, which is why he comes up short, and what a guy like Andre Ward or Hopkins wouldn't do. You'd see Hopkins and Ward standing off an opponent, then you'd see them coming on the inside, you'd see them working the body, you'd see them stifling, smothering, using that veteran experience. Those are the tests that my little viewing of Beterbiev so far tells me he may struggle with, because I haven't seen evidence of that versatility and that adaptability in his game so far. A guy like Badu Jack would be another one who... Badu Jack's got an underrated jab, underrated outside game. He's very tough, very strong, very formidable up close and on the inside. Those are competitive fights. I actually think, and this may be controversial, especially given the amateur pedigree, I actually ever so slightly wonder whether the likes of Kovalev, Jack, Bivol would have ever so slightly a boxing advantage over a Beterbiev. Would they be slightly faster to the punch? Would they have a bit more variety? Would they have slightly faster feet? I don't know. Certainly with Bivol, I suspect there would be a substantial speed advantage. Certainly with Jack, I believe there would be a substantial versatility advantage. Badu Jack is a guy we've seen fight in many different ways throughout his career to date, and that's very commendable. So, I guess what you're getting from this is a rambling video, and I'll try and summarise so I don't keep it too long, is that at this point, Beterbiev's career has been one of hype, and one that has been slightly frustrating to watch. He hasn't had the big fights, he's not getting any younger, he's becoming active, and he really needs 2018 to be the big boost to his career and get 3 fights out of the way against gradually increasing opposition. BoxRec have him at number 9 in the world so far, and whilst you could maybe have him a place or 2 higher than that, given some of the talent at 175 and given some of the names they've beaten, it's kind of a fair ranking. And whilst his resume is good for a guy with 12 fights, a lot of the times he's taken these opponents on, it's been untested opponents, or it's been opponents who are more towards the end of their careers, and whilst he's shown that he's got good pressure and good power, I also don't think that he has yet answered too many of the questions about elite level boxers. There's a lot of questions about Beterbiev still out there because he's been so untested, and from what I have seen, my real concerns with him would be lack of speed, lack of versatility, and frankly, is the guy a little bit predictable? He's clearly very, very good, don't get me wrong, but to answer the question, could I at this stage, based on the form that I've seen, pick him to beat a Pete Ward or a Pete Hopkins? No. Could I pick him to beat a Pete Bivol? Probably not. Probably not. I think the speed would be telling. I'd pick him to beat the guys like Barrera, the fringe contenders, quite easily. What about the likes of a Kovalev and Jack? I view those as more 50-50 fights, actually. In terms of the style, I view them as competitive. My gut instinct is that a guy like Badu Jack has a lot to offer, and a guy like Badu Jack is someone who can fight in many, many different ways, and would test Beterbiev in ways he's not been tested in the pro ranks. Kovalev, A lot of the fear factor's gone about Kovalev subsequent to the losses against Andre Ward, and it's kind of hard to work out where he is in the division. Obviously, with the history between these two guys, you'd have to say it's a pick and fight. I'd say it's a 50-50. All in all, 2018 crunch year for Beterbiev. Can he get in a World Boxing Super Series? Can his new promotional broadcast deal mean that the big fights are available to him, or does it make it even less likely? These are the key questions. 33 years old, he needs to get busy, he needs to get active, he needs to get in the big fights, and the window of opportunity to prove that he's the man at 175 is probably in relatively short order. That's my take. Appreciate there's probably a few Beterbiev fans who think he's the uncrowned man, and I'm sorry if this is not the take that you have on it, but I just feel I need to see a little bit more. For me, there's a few nagging doubts there, and with the talent being so deep at 175 right now, I think there are guys who I would be more confident in. I'd be more confident in a Bivol at this stage. Let me know your take. Please leave your comments in the section below. If you're new, if you haven't already done so, please do take the time to subscribe to the channel. Many thanks for tuning in.